I welcome you to our final session on day one of the IREN Growthpad Virtual Food Festival. Many of us have had a chance to smell the food, to taste the food virtually today, which has been quite a challenge. But at least those who are going to our portal, you had a chance to interact with some of our chefs, and we look forward to your feedback, your encouragement to the chefs, so that going forward, we can see what we can do best. At this juncture, I'd like to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Helena Williams, who is the CEO Gastro Gatherings, research scholar in the David D. Ree School of Business at Clarkson University, Potsdam, New York, in the United States. It's a big honor to actually have Helena join us because when we started the conversation of putting together a virtual food festival, a lot of the conversation was mostly to do with the food, less and less about tourism. And then we were lucky to come across your work, Dr. Helena, especially what you've been doing in India, consulting for other countries as far as what in Kenya we call food tourism, but I think in your papers you use the word Gastro Tourism. And so we really look forward to your presentation today. And this is how we are going to run our session. We are going to allow Dr. Helena Williams to make her remarks for at least 30 or so minutes, because I know she has a lot to unbundle for us today. And then thereafter, allow time for interaction. What I'll encourage our participants to do, make use of the chat button at the bottom of the screen. And when she's making her presentation, you can make comments, ask questions, because then after the 30 minutes, we can always just go to the chat button and look at what you've raised, and she can respond to that. And we can also thereafter allow you to engage via voice and video. So without much further ado, I'd like to invite Helena to make her keynote address. Welcome, Helena.
I'm going to share my slides. Well, first of all, just thank you very much. It's indeed an honor for me to be here with you today from New York. It's a privilege. My research and my life's work is really to set sparks of possibility with people in communities that are interested in looking at their cherished food traditions and interested in sharing those kitchen cultures, both domestically in their own country, as well as globally. And I know Kenya is rich in indigenous traditions and resources that gastrotourists around the world really are eager to discover. And Kenya can also boast about her foodie people and foodie experts that are already there, eager and listening to what can be happening in your country. I'm eager to listen to everyone who's already spoken at the conference today and will speak tomorrow. I've already heard Dr. Mary Abuksa Onyago speak very passionately about the nutritional values inherent in Kenyans' indigenous grains and fruits and vegetables, and the effects and efforts that are being made to share this information. I'm excited to get a copy of the Chakula Chetu recipe book that's being talked about at this event as well. And I'm humbly here to speak with you today with these esteemed colleagues. And I'm very thankful to James, to your director, for inviting me to contribute to this very important synergy. So with that said, let's just move on. I am a researcher and a director of gastro gatherings and a teacher, and I'm also an enthusiastic gastro tourist myself. And so I'm here to share all that information with you. So what exactly is gastrotourism? There'll be three parts to this presentation. What exactly is gastrotourism? And then we'll talk a little bit about the Gastrotoris and other stakeholders that are part of the process. And then we'll end with looking at elements that really help areas create sustainable gastronomic destination development. And I'll say up front that any of the information I'm sharing today is yours to also disseminate and share within your colleague networks. I'm very much interested in networking with everyone, and I will be sharing my personal email and business email at the end of the presentation. So do feel free to pass this information along as you see fit. So the part one topics will briefly talk about my research and then how experiential tourism in general relates to gastrotourism. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the local food and drink. So what my research set out to do, about 5 years ago, I began seriously researching the whole phenomenon of gastrotourism to better define how this phenomenon works. And it was an interesting and fun and academic experience, and I'm still in the middle of it. For the academicians that are here with us today, I'm providing a very brief information on the theoretical background of the research. If you're interested, it's all grounded in anything and anyone that affects your gastrotourism initiatives at micro and macro levels. Micro meaning your small entrepreneur who is beginning to create a gastro experience, as well as clusters or full country level gastrotourism. So anyone involved in that is very important to moving forward. And the other academic theory that was part of my ongoing research was the economic multiplier effect, right? And so we're not only looking at just money or funding that would come to the actual tourism event or business, but also any of the other kinds of monies that transfer through transportation and secondary uses of the money. We're looking at outside money coming into new communities. So that's where it's grounded. And what is it? It's the intentional pursuit of authentic, memorable culinary experiences of all kinds, regionally and even locally. So we'll be talking today about some domestic things that can be happening in tourism, as well as expanding internationally. Okay. So really, I want to make sure everyone understands that gastrotourism is more than just eating and drinking meals while you're on a vacation, right? It's a lot more than that. Gastrotourism is more than just eating. No, it's stuck. Here we go. It's about what we eat, how we eat it. It's about where and when we eat. It's about why we eat. And most important, it's recognizing that local foods, indigenous foods, and culinary practices actually built kitchen cultures that are ripe for discovery. My slides keep getting interrupted by people entering the room, so I'll try to accommodate that. Okay. And you can start seeing probably some familiar photographs here that help you understand that the kitchen cultures that have built up in your communities are really essential to what you're trying to create today. So gastrotourism is so much more than just eating out when we travel. It's really about experiencing, right? And so here are some examples of gastro experiences: cookery classes, festivals, conferences like you're doing today, foraging expeditions, market tours, winery and brewery tours, chef table dining, tastings. And here's an example of honey tasting, which I particularly enjoy. And I found that honey is a very important resource in Kenya as well. So looking at something like honey, not just as a product, but as a means to draw in tourists to understand honey production, as well as tasting the various flavors that are part of honey, is really all part of what this gastro experience is about. So where does gastrotourism fit in the world, right? It's a specialized subset that engages travelers who intentionally seek memorable, authentic food and beverage experiences. And it's a critical component to other types of tourism as well, right? So let's look at experiential tourism first, because in this day and age, tourists are not interested in just going and passively looking at something, or even going just to a beach and relaxing. They may do that for a day or so, but really they want much more experiential kinds of things. And so what really does that mean? So experiential tourism is a movement where people are really seeking these personalized meaningful moments through their travel experiences, and it's active, and they want to contribute to the experience. They want to learn from the experience, right? And while they're doing this whole idea of experiences, people are much more environmentally sensitive, and they display respect for the culture. It's not just a generic mass tourism kind of event. Experiential tourists really want to get to know you. So their desired outcome is to achieve this experience and to get new information and have this information and this experience be as authentic as possible, right? And so they want to meet people and visit places and really begin to create memorable moments that they will cherish for a lifetime, right? So the person's passions and interests and hobbies and idiosyncrasies, like loving food or wanting to understand more about food, being a food risk taker, trying foods that you've never had before, are all part of this niche tourism sector. So these authentic, memorable food and beverage activities are often infused within other experiential tourism travel situations as well. And we're going to talk about that briefly. Okay, so let's take a look. Cultural tourism, you can see in the far right, is about food as well, right? Culturally, people eat every day and they share those food cultures. Nature tourism is also encompasses food, as well as the wonderful environments that this food is part of. And ecotourism, not only will we be eating food, but we'll be learning how to take care of our land after we eat the food as well, right? And so these other forms of tourism, these are all photographs actually from tourism events that happen all over the world. They're actual advertisement pictures to draw you into that tourism situation. And I find that the display of food in these professional advertisements really helps us to understand how integral the food and drink of your community is to all of these tourism aspects. The picture in the middle here is actually a woman who is creating food through an adventure tourism site. And then, of course, agritourism, it's very obvious that it's food related. And there are wine and beverage tourism situations where you're exploring how a beverage is produced. And then all of this summarizes into really the gastronomic tourism experience. If someone is actually seeking just that experience, what does that look like and feel like? So like I said earlier, it really is all about the food, right? So local food is really the symbol of your destination. Does that food look familiar? Okay, it should, right? Can you identify geographic areas just by looking at food photos? Well, I believe you can. And so let's sort of take a look. Let's go down this food path, right? Local food and meals frequently conjure up these perceptions and connections to particular places, right? They symbolize the tradition and culture of the place. The food and the meal experiences have considerable destination branding potential. Just the food itself can help you brand your destination, right? Okay, I'm just so eager to visit Kenya and to sample this, right? And that's only just one part of the Kenyan food culture, right? We have all these wonderful flavors and possibilities, right? Does all this look familiar, right? And like I said, it's not just the food, it's also the beverage, right? We're looking at a product that is so unique to Kenya, banana beer, and even the ginger soda pop that is prevalent throughout parts of Africa is very centric to your food and beverage culture. These are not things I can get in the United States. They're not things you can get in China. They're things you can only get and sample and try in your country, right? So I look at all these food pictures and I'm so eager to come to Kenya just to want to sample a few of these, yet alone all of the things that are available. So of course, what country does this represent? Of course, it's Kenya. And I found this magical Kenya logo that was part of your tourism campaigns. And somehow adding the food and beverage to this seems incredible. Earlier, James talked about, I did some work in India, and I'm bringing this to you as an example of where India is in trying to establish themselves as a food destination. So this is a map that is available, and it breaks up the country in these regions. But if you look carefully, these are regions that are related to food, not related to transportation or other ways that you create maps, right? Like we have maps of Kenya that show you various things about Kenya. And the middle map was the closest I could find that really even talked about vegetation and agriculture, not necessarily like the India map did, right? Where it broke out these regions with food all around it and a chart that actually listed the kinds of foods that are available in these different parts of India, right? So taking these kinds of maps and creating something that helps people understand regional differences in how food is identified and prepared and flavored is one step in understanding the Kenyan food culture. Idili is a soft white bread that is eaten in India, but it is served and produced in many different formats in different parts of the country. There are different regional sauces and flavors that are used. Well, in Kenya, we have ugali, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And right, it is produced differently in different places. It is served and flavored differently. It is used almost to eat other foods. So this whole culture around just one product is something that Gastro Tourists would love to experience and love to explore, not just eating it once in a restaurant, but understanding how it's prepared and that it can be prepared with various grains and the whole, everything that surrounds this wonderful product. Again, just one thing that would draw people to Kenya, right? So this is what makes gastro touring an endless journey for people. And people are wanting this and craving this. And once they get a taste of it, right, they just travel over and over to learn about new cultures and experiences. And they want to do that with a variety of local hosts. They don't want to go to just one hotel, eat in that hotel, and think that they had African or Kenyan food. They want to explore, right? So here, we're gonna back up. So this is an even more intensive mapping of foods within India, right? And it shows the various regions and the types of food that are available. Very easy for a tourist to pull up this map and try to determine, where do I want to go in India? Well, it seems like there's an endless possibility. It would take them 3 years to figure out all these places they could go to eat. So they'll be coming back time and time again, right? And so isn't that what we want for Kenya as well, right? Some kind of a gastro map that has trails and clusters to introduce gastro tourists to Kenya's food and drink. So I want you to keep that in mind as we continue, because we're going to now talk about who is this gastro tourist that I kept talking about and why are they so important? Are they different from other tourists? So let's move forward with that. We're going to look at those things, and we're also going to look at the other stakeholders that are part of this tourism initiative, right? So very sort of Americanized are these photos of who are these gastro tourists. Well, gastro tourism is on the rise across all ages and genders and economic levels, right? Young people and baby boomers all are interested in this food phenomenon. And I say this confidently because I spent 5 years of my own personal life exploring this and researching this and asking people in all these generations, what is it about food tourism that excites you? Why do you do it? And I'm going to be sharing all that with you. baby boomers really were the ones to lead the way, right? And celebrity chefs began to be promoted on television shows, and people began watching that, and they wanted to have this same kind of experience. And this is Anthony Bourdain, who I consider the premier Gastro Tourist, would go around the world taping cultures and food related experiences and sharing them with the world. And if you look on his note, he's not talking about going to 5-star hotels. He says sleep on the floor if you have to. Find out how other people live, eat, and cook. Learn from them wherever you go. And Anthony actually passed away in 2018, but right before he did, he actually chose to visit Kenya. And you can go online and you can find his experiences in Kenya. He said it's dynamic and it's changing and it's incredible. So in my estimation, if the top Gastro tourist in the world chooses to come to Kenya to experience food, you have something going on here that the rest of the world really needs to understand, right? Okay. And so then I'll get back to the Gen X Gastro Tourist. They too, they are foodies, and they grew up really with the online resources and everything available to them to try to create food experiences. They were the first food bloggers, the first to go on these vacations. Millennials, 50% of them self-identify as foodies, and 52 would rather attend a food festival than a music festival. I mean, they want their music, but they want their food too, right? And they spend their money on memorable food experiences over purchased items. And of course, they're taking photographs all along the way, which helps your word of mouth. Now, this new Gen Z generation, I just started to investigate because they were really still a little too young when my research began, but they're happening now. And these are your college age students. They're traveling, they're taking gap years, they want to visit new places, and they grew up with parents who were already doing this. So they're very eager, they're not afraid of travel. They see traveling the world as the most important way to spend their money. So this is a group also to pay attention to. And so why do I keep talking about gastro tourists? Well, my research has proven that they travel more often, they stay longer. And I mean, a gastro tourist, a self-identified gastro tourist compared to just a regular kind of tourist, right? So these gastro tourists travel more often, stay longer, spend more money, and they create serious word of mouth, right? They're on social media platforms. All generations, even the baby boomers who are gastro tourists, are talking about their experiences online and with their friends, right? And we're going to talk about this a little later in more detail, but what they've told me is that if there are 6 or more foodie experiences within a 2-hour travel time, they will come and stay overnight for 1 or more days. So that's an important part for all you entrepreneurs who are out there. If you're just trying to do it alone, you have to really think about networking with your peers. They're not your competition. Your peers doing this work is the most important factor in drawing more people to your location, because if they'll visit you, they'll want to visit the brewery, they'll want to visit the cheesemaker, they'll want to visit the ugali creator. So think about that, right? And there were few significant generational differences. All of the generations did all of those things. The millennials traveled in larger groups and at least 6 to 10, which I'm not sure what's going to happen now with COVID restrictions, but these are all some interesting things to keep in mind, right? And the younger people, as you would think, might spend less because maybe they don't have as much money. My research actually said that these millennials spent slightly more per person during their deliberate trips, because what do they value? They don't necessarily buy houses or even cars, but they spend their money on traveling because they value that cultural experience and exchange. And most of them like to do it. Over 50% of millennials are foodies, so they want to do it through these food experiences. So what is the road to becoming a gastro tourist? Well, usually they don't start out saying, well, I'm a gastro tourist, right? They travel and they, begin to have these deliberate and incidental experiences, right? While they're traveling with food and with culture, that becomes very meaningful for them. And when they begin to say their most memorable travel experiences triggered these gastro storytellings, right? Then they realize that's what they want to do. And so instead of just saying, I'm going to Paris to see the Eiffel Tower, no, they will want to come to Kenya to experience real food, right? That's what they're seeking, the food, not the place or the destination. So keep that in mind when you're creating your own tourism advertising. It's the food, not the place. Yes, they come to Kenya, but they come for the food, right? All right. So think for a moment, just to personalize this. If I was there in person, we would, have an exchange right now. But what was your most memorable travel experience? Does it involve food or drink? Mine all do. And I bet some of you are shaking your head saying yes, right? Okay. So let's kind of look at this definition, right? The term foodie refers to people who enjoy and appreciate food a lot and also enjoy the cooking process, even if they don't cook themselves, right? Eating more is not just nourishment. They eat for many reasons, right? And so these are the definitions I used in my research, right? So using these definitions, raise your hand if you're a foodie, right? Usually when I do this in person, more than half of the room is waving their hand at me because they understand that food is something important to them. And then the next level is, are you a gastro tourist, right? It's a new term being used in the tourism industry. It refers to someone who deliberately internationally, regionally, and even locally to experience authentic cuisine, food and beverage in memorable ways. So again, raise your hand if you've ever traveled and partaken in food in different interesting ways, not just eating a meal. Right. And so if I'm in a live presentation, I usually share a bookmark with everyone. So I'm sharing it virtually with you today. So you can print it and copy it if you like, and you can share it with your friends. Explain you're either a foodie or you're a gastro tourist, and it's just a fun new thing. So I talked earlier about the difference between deliberate and incidental gastro tourists, right? And The deliberate tourists are the ones who routinely plan their travel and excursions for this food or beverage experience. But the incidental tourist might be in your area for some other reason. They're visiting friends, they're coming home because they've been away, they're on business trips, they're at a conference, right? And they too, while they're doing those other things, seek out these gastro experiences. 42% of people, when I ask people in my research, tell me about the gastro trip where you spent the most money, right? Because I was interested in economy as well, right? 42% of those people who said the most expensive gastro trip I had were incidental tourists. So think about that. If you're targeting just people that are planning to come for this vacation, that's not enough. You need to be able to do online, on the ground targeting of people through concierge services or posters or flyers in hotels or lodging to attract those incidental people who didn't come originally for food experiences, but they're a foodie and they consider themselves a gastrotourist. And when they come, they're already there for business. So to spend additional discretionary money seems appropriate to them because they're already there. So why not spend a little more to do something very memorable? And so you must pay attention to them as well. And these gastrotourists I'm talking about, really, they are your influencers, right? They're the first to discover new destinations. So if you're just targeting, even if you're just targeting general tourism campaigns, if you try to target these gastro tourists by enticing them through your food, remember earlier, food is the symbol of your destination. You might not know who the gastro tourists are, but if you lead with food, then they will come, right? And they will bring their discretionary money, their friends. So who are the other stakeholders we need to think about, right? So again, we talked a lot about the gastro tourist already, important, right? And your local loyal customers, also important, right? I found that there was some studies done that Africa is making more money from local tourism now during the pandemic. And it's not something to do just because we're self-isolating and countries are not exchanging tourists as readily, but it is something to do all of the time because those domestic travelers that come from one part of the country to another are also sharing in the multiplier effect of the money they bring, right? And then, of course, we have to think about the owners and managers of gastro businesses. I think some of you are here today as part of this conference. And again, then the developers of the tourism destination at a community level as well as a national level. So in summary, what did the Gastro Tourist tell us? What I thought was the most important thing they said was if the planning was easier, we would travel more often. They didn't say, I don't have enough money to travel more often, or I don't have the time off from work to travel more often. They said if the planning was easier, they would do it more often. They would take more short trips as well as long trips. And so what frustrated them? I'm going to flip through some of these things quickly, but you'll be able to go back to the slides if you're interested in actually developing this further. The number one thing they wanted was a phone number. They didn't just want to do everything online. They wanted to speak to a person, right? So keep that in mind. So suggestions for easier planning, right? They wanted more planning assistance from professionals, better communication with businesses, use of technology, a digital platform for accurately updating information on all gastro destinations. James and I were talking earlier about the importance of technology to what we do. As part of my business, gatherings, we are in the very basic stages of developing a GastroNet platform. We're just collecting information about gastro sites right now, and I hope down the road to be able to make this available to people as well. So if you're interested in this, I'll share more about it later, and I will share my my site. Okay. So they also wanted accurate pricing and a clear authenticity promise. They wanted, of course, safety assurances and adequate and reliable transportation, right? Those are all pretty obvious, but not always so easy to do. So what did the hosts tell us? The hosts of these places told us that to thrive, they need a core of local people who will come back to their establishments, you know, once or twice a year, as well as bring any of their visitors. But they also need a steady stream of out of the area tourists for them to economically survive, right? And then what did the developers value most about gastrotourism? Well, it boosts local economies through new outside of the area monies. That's the main important focus around economic development. It also creates local jobs and skilled workforces. It elevates local living standards in some places, such as potable water and sewage management, even in places. To attract tourists, those are things that need to be looked at, and also the benefits to local citizens are enormous when this begins to happen, right? So I created, as part of my research, quality of life indicators. This is just a basic chart, and you see at the very bottom, additional local indicators, right? These are just some national things that people look at, but we would look locally at what is a quality of life indicator for you. We would look at economic indicators that included new jobs and minimum local wages. And I'm particularly interested in the females that are employed at living wages when these initiatives begin, because I feel like women hold the culture, the food culture, not just in their fingers, but in their hearts. And you want to involve those people who are most authentic in this experience. I don't want to go to a hotel that hired a chef to teach me how to make this food. I want to learn this food from the people who are creating it from their hearts. And that's what gastrotourists want, right? Okay, and so I'm just highlighting that you begin these economic indicators the year before you create a major initiative, so that you can measure your success, so that in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, you see the differences. Okay. So in summary, these are the things the various stakeholders wanted and needed, right? Ease in finding the activity, steady flow of tourists, and economic development. Okay. So now, primary stakeholders, the various gastro destinations, right? The various people that you'll see that are part of your networks, right? Primary stakeholders, secondary stakeholders. And we don't have time to really look at all of that in detail, but the most important part is that you create a local model. If you are one entrepreneur, you should do this. You create a model that shows you all these things, your gastro competitors, your vendors, your delivered tourists, your incidental tourists, all by name. You should know the people that come into your business. And then later, you create these networks with your clusters and with your nation. Okay, so the 4 major international tourism trends that impacted this gastrotourism movement pre-COVID, right? Seeking experiences, personalization, digitalization, high touch and high tech, and implications of over-tourism. So now our number one overarching implication is health and safety, right? You're still seeking experiences, but they must be safe, right? You're still doing personalization. Your digitalization is no longer high touch, it's no touch and high tech, right? And over tourism just no longer is a problem, right? It's something to aspire to. And so the smart businesses have learned how to generate revenue and profits from personalizing their experiences and making more intimate personal foodie experiences like private chef tables, personalized tours, right? So let's quickly get to this sustainable gastro destination development. How do we do it, right? This is the nitty-gritty part, right? So these are things we'll be covering, and we'll be ending with that 6+ gastro cluster that I alluded to earlier, right? Gastrotourism is one of the most popular and prevalent types of experiential tourism and the one most adaptable to sustainable tourism destination. Why? Well, it requires minimal infrastructure and relies on local resources. Its sustainability hinges more on what it does not require, right? So keep this in mind, right? What does it need, right? First of all, local food and beverage resources. This is actually a picture of someone from Kenya in a potato field, right? And knowledgeable people. So you need the food and beverage and the knowledgeable people, right? This is a gentleman who is growing mushrooms in Kenya, right? That they're willing to share their experiences with you, right? Or with the world. What does it not need? It doesn't need man-made features such as mountains, even though you have mountains in Kenya, but not a requirement, right? It doesn't need an amusement park. It doesn't need a 5-star hotel, right? The food and beverage product, building that stakeholder network, and a minimum infrastructure. And these are all slides you can have, right? And I'm going to show you the cluster formation, which is most important. The final steps, right? Food and beverage resource experts identification all the way down to co-marketing, and examples of what other countries have done. And here I do want to take a minute to show you this. Peru particularly decided to brand in like 2012 and create a vision for where they wanted to be in the future. And not only did they succeed this vision, but recently they were nominated for the 9th year as the #1 World Travel Award destination. And this is India's initiative. And so I will end with this slide, the possible vision for Kenya by the year 2030. Potentially, Kenya could become the first African country to be recognized as an international gastro destination. And here's information about research that I am doing, and I want to give you my email so you can contact me. And thank you. Thank you for letting me share this information.
Thank you, Helena. Could you just hold the slide with the contacts for maybe 2 more seconds so that the participants can take the details, because the presentation you've made actually provides a whole framework for any entrepreneur to pick it up and get started and get going.
Very good. This slide that I have has my information.
Yeah, just, okay, we're holding it for 3 seconds. So I see Wilson looking at it keenly. Please, if you can take the details, others, and then I'm just asking my production team. They tell me 5 minutes we still have, so I welcome questions. You can still post it at the chat box area or still raise up your hand. I don't know, Wilson, if you want to give it a try. I know we've been chatting from morning to do the innovation, and now here you go. We have our whole framework. You take it to the bank, the way Kenyans would say, you take it to the bank. Wilson?
Yeah. Yes, I didn't get you. Come again.
Okay, first, okay, now I can request Helena to remove the presentation.
Okay.
And Wilson, I was just saying we've received a presentation that gives us the entire framework that you can actually work with to the bank. That's Kenyan English. I don't know if it can survive in the US, but so question time and suggestions as well.
Well, on my part, I don't have a question, but just to appreciate what Helena has shared with us, and I'll try to see whether I can provoke my students to engage in the same, so that we can have Kenya being the first country in Africa embracing the same. I think it's high time, just as I said in the morning, we need to shift from the incident where we have food for necessity and survival, but let us have food where it's changing our lives, creating jobs. Yeah, like for example, this gastronomy. Yeah, people are going to be employed because it's going to change the way business is done, unlike the norm whereby you are producing food to sell, you are buying food to eat, you all think about health. Now let us change the scenario to have it moving from getting food for survival, but having food as a vehicle for change in life, creating jobs, stimulating economies. You know, tourism, our local tourism, the one we're used to, wildlife, is a very big contributor to the economy. So if you can also add in now this food tourism, I think you can do a lot in stimulating the economy. Thank you.
And also, I have found that places that have food tourism initiatives also end up creating methods to help food insecurity issues in those same communities, because people are much more aware of food that is in the area and how to disseminate that food to people who don't have it. So the two things are not separate. They're very much connected. So if you have a strong food tourism program, you will decrease your food insecurity issues.
We have a question. Bilha, do you want to make comment? Hello?
No, I don't. I just want to appreciate her presentation. It has been quite insightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
You heard that it has to come from the heart. The food has to come from the heart.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, and it's I think very insightful presentation from Helena, because I know where Dr. Balongo comes from. The Gabric University is close to a honey producing area, and they're always standing along the road with bottles of honey. And today we've just learned that there's another way honey can be a tourism aspect. You know, this is quite interesting. I think Kenya is really seated on a gold mine after listening to Helena. Sally, would you like to say something?
No, it's just to appreciate what Dr. Helena Williams has mentioned, because at some point I saw Maquians on your slides. Oh. He is so huge and so good in terms of, he actually just travels for food, nothing else. Okay. Nothing else. And the best part is that, like you mentioned, they travel for food, they are our influencers. For Maquians, he does street food, which comes down to the local cuisine. And it's what we are trying to also push for the local cuisine and the indigenous foods. In fact, he doesn't try out the hotels, you know, the international hotels and stuff, but he goes straight to the streets, and he's amazing. It's been an eye opener, and thank you so much.
Well, I'm very excited. I hope to be able to come to Kenya and experience this myself.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you. We hope to see you soon after all the madness.
I think there is much churning there already. You're already moving in a positive way. And just remember that advertising and clustering,
Yes.
create these branded clusters and branded ways to put your information online, which now is free to do, right? So do it and people will begin to come. It needs to be easy for people to find. I had to hunt a lot to find some of this information. An average tourist doesn't have the motivation to hunt as hard as I would, right? So make it easy for the tourists to find you and find your special gems and your wonderful food, and they will come.
Very good. I'd like to invite Purity to make a comment. I know Purity was instrumental in the publication of Chakula Chetu. Purity, are you with us?
Yes, I would like to get a copy of that recipe book.
Yeah, the copy is right here.
Ah, very good.
Purity, if you're there, if you can make a comment. If not, I move to Esperance, if she's there, because it's the team that has really been putting together all this. Okay, yes, please, if you can make a comment.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
That is such a nice we thank you for the nice presentation, which is in line with whatever we are doing at the moment, or whatever we've done as IREN Kenya, which led to the production of the Chakula Chetu cookbook. So from the presentation, I've picked some tips which I know that will align to whatever we are doing here at IREN. Thank you so much.
Before I give Helena to make the last comment, is Esperance there? I'm now picking on the Chakula Chetu team.
Yes.
Wherever they are.
Thank you so much, Dr. Helena, for the great presentation. Actually, it's an eye-opener on my side on how people view a tourism destination. I know most people are just going to a hotel or just going to eat somewhere or have a drink, but really it's about the memorable experience that you get from going to that hotel, or even just eating under a tree, because some people, when they go and have, let's say, dinner at some restaurant, they'll always remember the kind of activity that happened during that time, or the kind of conversation they had with maybe someone they just met, and it always sticks in their mind. So we need to review how we look at a destination as a tourist attraction. And it's good that you brought up the topic of gastrotourism. And so for the Kenyan market, we have 47 tribes, and these tribes have different cultures, different traditions, different types of foods, how they prepare them, how they grow the ingredients. So imagine if all this was put into practice, into an innovative way to bring out this unique value foods that we can offer, then it will be really interesting. And I also got 2 points from you on the 2 types of gastrotourists, the deliberate one and the incidental one. And for someone who is interested to develop such a thing, actually, it's good to know who are the people you're supposed to target, not just the people you're looking forward to come to your destination, but you look around the ecosystem that you operate in and see, so who else can be a +1 to come and visit my tourist offering. And then lastly is on the planning. I like the model of the 6 cluster model. You just don't offer one thing. What else can someone come experience and go back and tell their friends and peers and colleagues that, yes, I went to a Kenyan restaurant or I went to a Kenyan home and this is what they offered me and I'm really going back there. So thank you so much for the great presentation and I hope to see you when you land in Kenya. Karibu sana.
Well,
okay.
Esperanza,
Very good.
I think you can do my presentation.
Yeah. I'll give you the last moment. I don't know if Justin is with us, because Justin, I would be happy if you can make some comment if you are with us from the point of view.
Yeah.
I know.
Yes, I'm here with you.
Oh, very good.
I think I'm happy.
Okay.
I'm happy about the comments
Justin,
we have received
just a minute. Justin, just a minute. I'd like you to comment from the point of view, you are from an area with so many kingdoms. Yes. And kingdoms have ancient history, and there you go. We've seen even how to map the country just using food. So if you can comment with that in mind as well. You've got 1 minute, please.
Yeah, I want to say that I want to thank Prof for the good presentation, but also say that as a region, especially the Western region and where I come from, we have kingdoms. And kingdoms are known by the food. The king must be generous, must have enough food. And this food, the food that we have is traditional food that you are not likely to find elsewhere, well prepared traditionally. So I feel that if we picked up this, we can, together with what is happening in the kingdom, it can be a very good tourism circuit that we need to think about. Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, now I invite Helena to make the last comment. And as you make the last comment, there's one sticking out point where you showed that with Gastrotourism, there's no rivalry. When actually each one is moving, you bring in more, as opposed to if you want to close your own little corner, then things will not move. And I think this is a very powerful point for people in this region, that we have a lot of trials on indigenous foods, indigenous restaurant offering foods, but each thinks that the other is a rival, and you're just showing that they're no rivals.
Right. Well, that's probably the most important point of my research, and the most difficult sometimes for people to intuitively understand, because they think if somebody comes to your restaurant or your honey making place, they might not come to my cheese making place. But it's the opposite. If they go to the honey place, they'll go to the cheese place, they'll go to the restaurant, especially if you create a little pamphlet where all of these things are on it, like a trail or a cluster, because then it shows that you're united, and you're also holding on to the authenticity. And to some extent, the businesses help maintain the quality. If it's just you, right, you're doing your work and maybe you get tired and your quality level could diminish. But if you're doing it with a group of other people, someone's going to say, hey, you need to be open when you said you're open, because the tourists came and then they didn't come to my place because your place wasn't open, and it messed up the whole thing. And I find that that happens when people are singularly trying to get tourists to come. When they do it collectively, it's easier for them, it's cheaper for them, and it creates a better sense of reliability. So you have all of the food, you have the enthusiastic food experts, you have the culture that is just regionally, like I showed you the map of India. You can do that same thing in Kenya with the kingdoms and the tribes and the culture that is indicative of those specific regions. People will be wanting to come back to Kenya year after year to experience something new, not just the same thing they experienced once. So
yes.
so thankful that you made me a part of your little community, at least at this level. And I do look forward to working with you in the future. If anyone has any questions, especially that back end of the slideshow that I had to rush through, that's the basic foundation for doing it at a larger level, right? So you can look through those slides. They're pretty self-explanatory, but I could provide any additional information on those steps in developing an initiative. So best of luck to you.
So we thank you so much, Helena, for your time and for actually researching a lot. You've even given us a lot of Kenyan images that some of us may not be aware. I like the potato, and the potato is almost bigger than the gentleman. So, but thank you so much. So at this time, I'd like to bring to an end our Zoom session. And as you heard from Helena, her slides are available for sharing. And for all of us who know what intellectual property is all about, of course, when you receive such slides, make sure if you have to make use of the information, you credit the source in order to make this more vibrant as opposed to closing opportunities for the future. Thank you so much, and everybody have a good evening. And Helena, you have a good, I think, good morning now in United States.
And have a good second day of the conference. I hope to tune in to some of the sessions myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.